skies.
Okay.
I played that game to death. I still have the copy. It's in pieces, but I still got everything. But 20 years of playing that game, I could never complete 25 missions. I
know.
I was always shot down at some point. I'm a lousy dice roller.
Yeah. And
so,
the thing is,
what happened then? I said, you know what? This is while I was still working in the TV business in the early 2000s. I said, why not do this for the B-29? And that became the inkling for B-29 Super Fortress. And I worked on it in between doing all my TV shows. And it got to the point that I needed some help because I just couldn't handle it alone on top of the TV business I was in at the time. And that's when I got Sean Reif involved. And he and I together ended up producing B-29. And it's been a good game. A lot of people like it.
Now, the thing is, B-17, lower altitude, B-29, higher altitude.
Yes.
Now, were there any fighters that were able to reach the B-29?
They were few, but they didn't fly high altitude all that much because, as with the B-17s at their altitude, the bombing accuracy was not that great. So that's when LeMay decided to, you know what, we're going to go down low and we're just going to smother them with incendiaries. And that's basically what happened. But they did have some fighters that could reach that high, not many. But, and they also had night fighters, not many, but never enough to make a difference. But when they went to lower altitude for the bombing missions, that pretty much was it for the Japanese. I just couldn't handle that.
Now, what was the average of B-29s being shot down?
I can't really give you a figure on that because I'd have to start going to my library and pulling out books and all that minutia. That's why I got part of my library. Well, you can't see the bookshelf. That's back there in the corner.
Okay.
But my main library is in another room, and that's where I have all my books. But I'd have to pull those off the shelf. So it wasn't so much the enemy fighters that were the problem. It was the fuel management that was a big issue with them. And plus the fact the plane was really buggy. It was one of those planes they really didn't test it out thoroughly. It almost went straight into production off the assembly line.
Okay.
So they had the problems mechanical wise and fuel wise, having enough fuel management to make sure you had enough fuel to get home. Because they were fighting headwinds, which they knew nothing about at that time, the jet stream.
Really? Eh?
So you spent a lot of time in the air, maybe spending 30 minutes tops over a target, and then you're on your way back home for the next 10 hours. So it took a lot of time and fuel management to make it safely back home. It was a different combat situation.
Now, all those tables, how do you wrap your mind around all those tables? I mean,
one table at a time.
Really, eh?
Yeah. Right now, I'm working on the next series in the target for the B-29 line. I got it tentatively titled Kenny's Boys, which covers bombing missions with the 345th and 380th in the Southwest Pacific. And I'm working on the target tables right now for both bomb groups. I've got the 380th finished, which flew B-24s, and a 345th flew B-25. So you're going to have a chance to fly high altitude missions with the B-24, and then you can have a chance to fly low altitude missions, strafing and skip bombing with the B-25.
Steve, I'm going to jump back and forth, okay? Because that's the way I am.
Yeah.
Now, you're very specific with whom you choose to make a game about. And you wrote a book called Photo Recon Became Fighter Duty.
Yes.
And this is based on Squadron 251. And that's what I mean. You're specific.
Yes.
In World War II.
Yeah. Yeah. Just so you know, that's the squadron I served with in the Marine Corps.
But isn't that the squadron your dad served with also?
No. My dad was Air Force. I had no relatives that served in the Marine Corps, as far as I know. I'm the only one that has. But I served with VMFA 251 from 75 to 79. And I saw, and then when I wrote to the USMC History Division and the Marine Corps Heritage Association requesting a grant, applied for it, and next thing I know, I ended up getting a grant to write the book because the History Division had just gotten pretty much a command from the Commandant of the Marine Corps. We need to update the squadron histories of the Marine Corps.
You did not get the grant?
I did.
Oh,
I did get the grant, and then I got picked to go ahead and write the book. And so I spent from 2012 to 2015 researching, and then got the book written in a year and had it published in 2016. And now I'm working on the squadron's history from 1946 to 1991. That's going to be the second book, which I'm currently working on top of the games and working.
Okay, I'm going to backtrack.
Okay.
Here, remember when I asked you tables, blah blah blah, and all that? Where do you get all? So this is very interesting. Can you see that question or thing on your screen?
No, I didn't say it. I'm kind of concentrating on you. So this.
Okay, it says anyone with roots in RPG knows you can buy entire books on nothing but tables, which is probably why the solitaire game never intimidated me. So okay, so are you an RPG player?
No, I am not. No.
Okay.
I guess a lot of the games that I designed with the help of Bob Best and Sean down the road, these would be great for computers with all the tables and it would take a lot of work out. But yeah, you need those tables, in my opinion, to provide the randomness of what might happen as you're flying. I mean, there's been some talk, some guys, hey, there's not enough decision making for me. I said, well, that's fine. That's your thing. But when you think about it, what can a pilot do at 23,000 feet when he's got to put 10 bombs on target?
10?
Yeah, well, if that's what they carry, 10 500-pounders, 10, whatever they carry.
Okay.
And you're basically sitting in a plane. If something happens, if the engine goes bad, you either shut it off or you try to restart it. You try to control the fire. There's some decision making you can do, but it does. You really don't have any control. You're at the mercy of flak. You don't know if you're going to get hit or not. You're at the mercy of the fighters. You don't know if you're going to get hit or not, or if you're going to get attacked. You're at the mercy of the other gunners in your squadron formation to help protect you. You don't know what's going to happen with them. So anyway, all those tables try to provide the uncertainty of the mission. And of course, the variety of targets that you could have a chance to hit. The game, you can play that game for 20 years and you'll fly 25 different missions each time. So there's a lot of replay value in that. And hell, I played, like I mentioned before, B-17 Queen of the Skies for over 20 years. And that only covered 1943. So, what? Yeah. Yeah.
And anybody who says that they've completed 25 missions, I'm a little bit skeptical to believe them. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm sure it can happen. Not that often, but it didn't happen that often in real life.
No. There was a podcast I listened to. This guy flew in a B-17 for like 35 missions, and it's like, man. But anyways. Yeah. It carried away, Steve, so don't worry about it.
Well, the thing about it with this next game where I'm working on called Kenny's Boys with Bob, their mission count was a little bit different. They got credit for the length of the mission, not how many you flew. So the longer mission you flew, the more credit that you got, and you had to have X amount of points before you could be sent home.
You're talking about in terms of miles?
In terms of miles, distance-wise. So if you flew a target from Darwin, Australia to a city in Java, you're looking at over 1,200 miles one way. It taxed the range of the B-24 and then come back. So they would get, let's say, 10 points. But if they flew for Darwin to, say, some target in New Guinea, which was maybe 5 or 6 zones away, which is about 300-400 miles, with the scale of the game, you might get 2 points. But you had to complete the mission to be able to get those points. So if the plane aborted for any reason, you didn't get the points for that mission. So there's no telling how many missions it would take for a crewman to earn enough points to get back. And then they kept the catch-22 situation. They kept raising the number of points you had to complete. So How we're going to handle that yet, I haven't really decided. I may just keep it, hey, a straight 30 missions and be done. Or unless we can figure out a range table, you get X amount of points if you successfully complete the mission. And then if you earn X amount of points, then you get to go home.
So I mean, how do you determine between a long and a short mission the hazards in conjunction to each or? Because you might be flying over the Pacific for whatever. I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
For 20 hours and there's nothing, but
Right.
you might be flying for 3 hours over whatever, and you're getting shellacked. So
Well, yeah, we're still in the developing stages of the rules with the current game, but with B-29, of course, it's been a long time since I played that and looked at the rules, but I think with B-29, you didn't really face Japanese fighters until you were over Japan.
right,
You were basically on the way there. You were fighting the fuel and management of the plane to make sure you made it to the target, and then once you're over the target, you dropped the bombs and finished with the attacks. And then you came home again,
Right.
having to worry about the fuel management. And if you got damage over Japan, especially with the loss of fuel, you pretty much you ain't making it back. So
yeah, it's a nice way of putting it there.
yeah, so there's going to be some interesting changes. Another one in the game, you're going to be able to skip bomb. This latest one, low-level strafing, and the B-24s were actually used in armed reconnaissance missions, and they actually strafed and skip bombed with B-24s.
But skip bombing, you're talking about something like the what's that? The British operation there. What's it called?
Oh, the dam busters?
Exactly. Are you talking about the same thing?
Pretty much. You're at low altitude, you drop the bomb, it skips over the water, and when it strikes the ship, it explodes, and then you peel away. Yeah.
Okay.
So and of course, the B-25s, with the other group, that's what they specialized in. They modified the plane to put 850 calibers in the nose, and just made it a flying gun platform. So they went at low altitude, and they ended up dropping parafrags, all kinds of stuff. All dropping within 500 feet from the ground.
Really, eh?
Yeah. And then by flying so low, it prevented the Japanese also from attacking from below. And if you read the mission reports, there's a few instances where they believe that Japanese planes, in diving to try to attack the B-29s at such a low altitude, they misjudged the distance and ended up, as they're trying to pull out of their dive, and realized too late they're going to hit the ground. And now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it's a possibility. But as the war progressed, though, they faced less and less Japanese resistance from the air.
Right.
The domination of the Allied forces in the air by 1944 was pretty much complete. So the main threat was from anti-aircraft on the ground and from ships, which would be interesting.
Sorry, I cut you off, Steve.
That's okay. I'm pretty much done there. Go ahead.
Okay, let's take a question from Nathaniel Robinson. You plan on incorporating a B-24 variant? How will you work in the more complicated flight pains? Actually, he said pains. He wanted to say
Planes.
patterns than the Mitchells flew.
Well, yeah, the B-25s flew a little bit differently. They did occasionally fly medium to high altitude bombing missions, but I'm not sure. I still haven't found any solid information yet on how the formation was formed. I don't know if they flew in a box formation like the heavier bombers, or if they flew loosely. Now, when it went into low altitude, they normally, when they began to strafe on numerous occasions, they would line up wingtip to wingtip in a echelon in a straight line formation over the target area, and they would end up just plastering the runways or whatever they were attacking all the way through at such a low altitude, wingtip to wingtip. If you can picture 9 airplanes like that.
No, I can't.
And then sometimes it would fly in flights of 3. When they would attack, you'd have 3 planes in echelon, kind of diagonal like, I don't know, kind of like so and so, like so.
Right.
They would go into attack, and then the next flight of 3 would come into attack. And then the next flight of 3 will come into attack. That's if you're using a group. When you're single, I wouldn't have to worry about that too much because if you're going to be at low altitude, it's only you worrying about. But if you're playing in a squadron, then you're going to have to worry about the number of flights and the number of planes that are going to be attacking. So we're still working that out.
Now, Steve, when you were in the Marines, you were aircraft mechanic. Is that right?
Yeah, I was an aircraft electrician. Yes.
Okay, so I've got a question in my mind that I hope you can answer. When these planes, you said flying tip to tip. Now, are they on autopilot or are they just like driving on the highway type of thing? And
no, well, I use wingtip to wingtip figuratively.
No, but I understand, but they're still close together, man.
No, you have to. I'd have to say they're probably not on autopilot. They're flying manually because the pilot, the B-17 was structured in such a way, especially once the modifications were made. The pilot not only flew the plane, but he also in some of the modified B-25s, he also dropped the bombs. Or he also operated the nose guns, the 8 nose guns and the 850 calibers in the nose. So there's going to be a lot of variations, but it was all by hand. Now, when they're flying to the target up at a higher altitude, they could probably put it on autopilot. There's not much to do, but when they were down there having to react, it was all manual. And it's the same nowadays. You can put the plane on autopilot if you're flying at high altitude, if you're just kind of cruising. But if you're in air combat, you're going to be doing it by the stick. You're doing it all your own.
So in terms of fighters, the fighters, it looks so tight when they turn and all that. But that's what I'm saying. Is there a sequence? I don't know how to formulate the sentence, but because I see that it looks so tight when two jet fighters turn like that, is it that tight? Is there some sort of automation that happens, or are they on manual and it's like?
No, there's a lot of training that goes in that, and there's different probably rules and regulations depending on what plane that you fly. But there's a distance that you maintain, and of course, the guy that breaks first is probably usually the lead of the flight element, and usually there's a little time difference before the other plane breaks, break and break. I mean, they look close, but there's actually some distance between the planes. Okay. So it takes a lot of practice. I'm not a pilot.
Right.
I just worked on the wiring systems on the ground. So, excuse me. Hang on 1 second.
I'll do the same.
Thank you, Kevin. There, you were looking forward to that. Yeah, it's coming along. So we'll see. Now, there's not going to be any B-17s and Kenny's boys. It's only going to be B-24s and B-25s. Whether or not I do a Queen of the Pacific, I don't know yet. I've got four different games right now in various stages of production. Kenny Boys is one. Linebacker 2 with the B-52 concerning the B-52 missions, Christmas of 72, December of 72. I've got a Forgotten Sideshow, which I've been working on. And then I've got one called Operation Nordwind, which was the last German offensive in the West, which was launched just before midnight, January 1st, 1945. That one's been on. I've been developing that one for it's going on almost 8 years now. The reason it's been delayed so much, I want to incorporate the actual 1/50th scale maps that the Army used of that region as the board for the game. And I was missing one piece where I could put the whole fighting area together as one big map. And I finally was able to find a copy of that map that I was missing. And so now that I've got the 4 pieces that I need, I'm working on the map of that game. I've got the pieces, I've got the cards. It's meant to be an introductory level to the hobby. It's not an overly complicated game. It's an area movement game, but you'll have and card driven. And the last main thing, once I get the map finished, will be, of course, to play test it and work out a bot system for the game for solo play.
Now, you also have a free game that's a print and play called Axonar.
Yes. Yeah, that game is based on a fan film called Prelude to Axonar.
Okay.
I've been involved with that for a few years. I help out with the shoot. They're currently working on parts 4 and 5 of that film. So everything in that game is just based on Prelude and what it represents. So it's basically, in Star Trek lore, the 4 Years of War was against the Klingons, which concerned one of their characters seen in the 3rd episode of the original series called Garth, who was a well-known admiral, and Kirk studied him. But it covers that 4-year campaign between the Klingons and the Federation and Federation allies. So it's free. I can't sell it because of the regulations with the copyright with Star Trek. But since it's based on that, on the fan film, I decided, hey, if you want to play it, it's free. And Lee Smith, a fellow solo gamer, was kind enough to make a Vassal version of it. So it's available on Vassal if you want to download it and play it.
So where can we get the free thing if we want to print it out?
If you want to print it out, you just go to my gaming site, stephenkdixon.com, and look under games, and you'll see a link pointing you to where you can download the files.
Well, that's cool, because you just answered Matt Chestnut's question he was answering before about the Star Trek themed game that you were talking about. And so yeah. I think you just made this guy happy.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, Matt, it's available on the site. It's a work in progress. So if you play it or with friends or whatnot, if you see any errors in the rules or anything like that, something not working right, just email me, and I'll keep updating the rules until we get it right. So it's just been I don't know, a love of mine to get that game finished. So, yeah.
No, it's funny. A forgotten sideshow.
Yes.
Poindexter, the guy I was telling you about that does amazing videos. First of all, why the weird title, and any updates and news?
Okay. Forgotten Sideshow is based on the book that I wrote, Photo Recon Became Fighter Duty. The reason I call it a forgotten sideshow, you don't really hear about the action, the aviation history of that area, and basically what they had to endure in keeping the Japanese at bay at the time. And the squadron, even though it was a reconnaissance squadron, was used as a fighter squadron throughout its period during the war.
And so they were not trained as a fighter. In
the early days, no, they were photographic pilots. They had to be trained. They flew modified Wildcats, called the F4F3P, with the camera, but it retained its machine guns. So these guys, they flew these Wildcats. They were able to down 32 Japanese aircraft over Guadalcanal.
So this is a
251.
A 2-personnel fighter plane, right? A pilot and the guy in the back, right?
No, they flew. The Wildcat was a single-seat fighter. And then they ended up flying Corsairs for Forgotten Sideshow, flying out of Piva in Bougainville and striking targets in that area, basically as a fighter bomber. They would just drop bombs on different types of targets. So the game is more, if you play the full advanced game, you're going to be managing a Marine Corps squadron, and you're going to have to assign pilots for missions during the day, keep track of your maintenance of your aircraft, and that sort of thing, and try to hold your losses down. Yeah, it's almost ready, so I'm hoping to have that done here within the next 3 to 4 months.
So when you say it's almost ready, like I'm going to get it in 3-4 months, or you're finished in 3-4 months, and then it's going to be a year?
Right. Well, it's got to go through one more playtest phase, and that's with all the advanced rules for the campaign game where you manage the squadron. I struggled with that for the longest time, to try to find a randomness to determine losses when you're flying 16 aircraft in a mission. So they fly in 4 flights of 4 Corsairs, and trying to, how do I determine which airplane is lost out of the 16 aircraft? So it took me a while to figure that all out, and then to work up a combat system where the Japanese have a chance to win. Of course, it's given that the Japanese are going to lose. You're going to have to just keep your losses at a minimum, and if the Japanese come around with a draw, that's a victory. So,
and Steve, going back again. I'm gonna back and forth again.
Okay.
Your book now.
Hmm.
I was going to ask you a question. Why do you feel the need to write the history on something like the Squadron 251 in World War II?
Well, for one, there's nothing covering that subject. And the Marine Corps wanted a history of the squadron, an up-to-date history. There is no history of 251 written.
Right.
So I decided to take on that task and do it. I mean, I served with the squadron, and that probably helped me get that assignment to write it. And I was thankful enough that they offered me another grant to write the next book in the series,
Which is?
which will cover the Cold War from 46 to 91 of VMFA 251. Even though the squadron was deactivated in 45, it was reactivated a year later as a Marine Reserve Squadron. And then when the Korean War broke out, it went in on active duty and has remained on active duty until April of this year, where they deactivated the squadron in order for it to start transitioning to the F-35. And the squadron right now is set to be reactivated in a couple of years, flying out of Cherry Point. It'll no longer be flying out of Beaufort, South Carolina.
Okay, now you just mentioned Korea, so again, my brain goes up. So, okay, no, hold on a second. What about Hell Over Korea? Now, the stats changed dramatically, if I'm not mistaken, from World War II, the B-29, to Hell Over Korea when there was jets happening, right?
Right. And, well, another thing, the B-29 was pretty much outdated for Korea. It just could not. They tried using it in a daylight mode, and it was just horrendous. They went to night for a little bit, but it was a deadly fight. The jets were. I mean, if you can survive the number of missions on Hell Over Korea, you're a damn good player.
Really, eh?
Yeah, it was pretty rough for those guys in Korea. Yeah.
And I guess we're looking at MiG. What is it? MiG. What do they call MiG 51s or something?
MiG 15s.
MiG 15. Sorry.
Was the primary fighter. Of course, you had some prop jobs too from the North Korean side, but we know now that most of those MiGs were flown by Russian pilots during the war.
Right.
Yeah, but we didn't really have anything that could keep up with the MiG-15 until the F-86 came about.
So that what was the jet that we used to counteract that MiG-15?
Yeah, that was the F-86. Yeah, the Sabre. Right.
And how late in the Korean War did that come in?
I'm not exactly sure. The game, the add-on module for Hell Over Korea just covered, I think, the period in 51, because they quit using the B-29 after those missions because of the losses were just too much. So I can't recall if I'd have to pull the game out. That was done so long ago. My memory's going a little bit, but I'd have to go get the game or look up when that came about. I think I want to say late 51, early 52 when the Sabre came in. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but I'd have to look it up.
And these games, Picket Duty, B-29, the add-ons and all that, Target for Today, you're a solo player, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like everybody else. It's hard to find people to sit down and learn these games and play.
Yeah.
As much as I love face-to-face flying, it was just getting harder and harder to find an opponent to play. Of course, you end up getting older. You move. Most of us probably had a core group of players we could count on at some point, and they move. They have families. Life goes on. Yeah. But we still like to play the games. So,
and I appreciate you doing solo games because the same issues here. I mean, I love it, man. I love all the charts. I just love it. I don't know. It doesn't bother me at all. Not at all.
Well, that's the reason I'm sticking with the solo games. Now, Nordwind is going to be a 2-player game. Of course, you'll have the bot for solo.
Right.
But I design these for players for people that you can't find any opponents, and a good narrative to go with it. You create your own stories with it.
And so you designed the bot for these 2-player games?
The box?
The bot The
Well,
AI.
I haven't started that yet because I'm finishing up on the map. I kind of do one thing at a time with my games.
Okay.
I'll try to work on 3 or 4 things because I got to stay focused on one item. So I'll finish the map. And once I got the map finished, then I can lay all the pieces out. I've got the cards already done. I've got the pieces done. I've got the tables done. And that would just leave me to work out a good bot system with the cards.
Okay. So in terms of reading the rules, checking everything in terms of development, is that all you?
For the most part. And then when the game through players testing, and once we get feedback and we incorporate changes and then play, and do the play testing again, we tweak it up. And once we're satisfied with everything and we get good feedback, we wrap it all up and then we send the files to Legion War Games.
Okay.
And then once Legion gets them, it goes through a whole art process, and they end up proofreading a lot of the elements of the game, and they'll get back to us and say, "Does this need to be this or that?" And inevitably, unfortunately, no matter how many people are involved in this process, no matter how hard you look, there's always something that creeps up, and that's where you have the errata sheet.
Yeah.
I don't know how you solve that. I mean, obviously I can't do it alone. I hate proofing my own work.
Yeah.
Because you spend so much time involved in it.
And whatever you're reading is right in your head, so it's wrong on the paper, but it doesn't matter. It makes sense in your head. So
yeah, right. And I've been fortunate that there's been some dedicated players that, especially with Picket Duty before the 2nd edition, that went through a rigorous rules rewrite.
Right.
And it seems to have worked out pretty good. So people are really liking that. So
at Legion, do you have like carte blanche? Whatever you design is going to be printed at one point.
Well, I've been lucky so far. It has been.
That's great.
I email Randy these ideas that I have, and this is what we got in the pipeline, and he hasn't said no yet. So I do these games, and like I said, Randy at Legion has been really great. His company, it's basically a one-man show. He's gotten some help recently.
Right. Okay.
The components are always nice, and the artwork is fantastic. And I thought they did a really great job setting the mood and target for tonight, the way the pieces look.
Who's the artist?
Hang on. Well, do I have my copy? No, I can't remember. It was Brad. Oh, I can't think of his name now. I'm really bad with names. It's one of my faults.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to look at the game.
I was going to say something. Okay, obviously airplanes are your thing because you were involved in aircrafts.
Yeah.
In your service.
Mm-hmm.
You plan on doing a tank game?
Well, Nordwind is going to be a change of theme. That's land combat.
Okay.
You're going to have infantry. You're going to have artillery. You're going to have tanks, and there's the air support element to it. But the thing about Nordwind, a lot of the combat took place in probably what was considered the coldest winter ever experienced in Europe up to that time. I mean, the temperature-wise, it went into the negative numbers. So that kind of curtailed movement, and it kind of curtailed the benefit of air support, especially for the Americans. It was a seesaw battle, but at that stage of the war, the Germans just didn't have enough, especially after the defeat in Battle of the Bulge, to really make that counteroffensive work. The aim was to try to split the 7th from the 3rd Army and force some kind of peace or sort of temporary peace surrender terms with that, but that wasn't gonna work.
Now you're comfortable in this medium?
Yeah, well, my grandfather served with that division during the Second World War, the 70th Infantry Division. It was one of the divisions that participated in Nordwind. He was a combat engineer, and I've been involved with the 70th Division Association for since 1996. So it's going on almost 25 years now. And I maintain the association's website, and I'm currently president of it. So I've been heavily involved in it. And Nordwind is not an offensive or a combat situation that most people hear about. It just doesn't get any kind of press because it fell right after Battle of the Bulge, and everybody was concentrated on in that aspect of the whole winter offensive there.
And it's funny that you say that because I seem to think of you as like a, I don't know if you know this designer called David Thompson. He goes on obscure titles called like Castle Eater, Pavlov's House, and you seem to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I have Castle Eater. I enjoy playing that game. So, and I read the book that came out a few years ago based on a whole incident, which I think would make a fantastic movie. But we'll see the way things are now. Who knows when we're going to see a movie in a movie theater? So, yeah.
I know what you're saying. So let's answer this, Rick Fortier. Do you speak French?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, my mother's French, but I don't speak it.
You from where?
She's from France. She lived her childhood under Nazi-occupied France.
Bloody hell, man! Where was she?
Huh? She was in the south end of France, but it was in Vichy territory for a while, but that didn't last too long. The Germans came in anyway. And she lived a life of deprivation from 1940 to 44 when the Germans left finally because of the D-Day invasion.
This changes the whole interview. Now, do you have any stories on stuff like that? Because the reason why I ask is I'm here in Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
Because my parents left Italy because of World War II.
Yeah.
So, you have any stories that your mom would say?
She never talked about it other than she hated the Germans. However, just recently, a couple of years ago, I said, Mom, you ought to write down what you can remember, for the kids and for the family. And she worked on that for the longest time. And she finally finished it and sent me a copy. And then I had copies made and gave to the kids. And I did find out that an uncle of hers, which I never knew about, was taken away by the Germans as slave labor and didn't return until after the war was over. And it was just a life of deprivation for her. They were constantly hungry. She was just so angry when she would walk by these German, they would take over the buildings and see them polishing their boots with butter, and their mouth is watering because they haven't tasted butter in years. It was just whatever wild food they could get their hands on, and then living in constant fear. I mean, she was born in 1934, so she was 6 years old when the Germans came.
And she was 10 when they left.
Yes. Yeah. That's the kind of childhood she lived under.
Is there any way you will ever have those memoirs printed or available?
No. She wanted them kept in the family. And then I had my dad do the same. He wrote his memoirs of his time. Of course, my grandfather was a coal miner and lived in the hills in West Virginia. And he was drafted age 31 in March of 1944.
Okay, that's quite old.
Yeah, well, they looked at the age restrictions. They needed the bodies because the casualties were so high. And because, I guess, of his experience in the mines, they made him a combat engineer, and he ended up at Camp Adair, where he joined the 70th. And then they left Adair and moved to Fort Leonard Wood, trained some more, and then they were on their way to France in December of 44 and arrived in January of 45. And then he saw combat as an engineer from February to May 45. Yeah.
Anyways, do you Steve, do you feel that all these stories, and that's why I asked you, are you going to make these available? And I wish you would think about this, please. Do you feel that all these stories are going to be lost in 50 years?
I hope not. I could always send copies of these to the Library of Congress, I guess, where they're permanently kept. But out of respect for my mom's wishes and my dad's, they were written strictly for the family. They're not long. It's just what they could remember. Together, maybe total 100 pages tops, maybe. But for right now, I don't. That may change in the future. I just don't know.
Okay, because my mom was 10 when she was in around Casino.
Oh yeah, that was a nasty place.
That was nasty, and I remember her telling me, and I'm these people. A lot of people have heard these stories before, and this interests me so much that she used to hang around with. And I'm just going to be stereotyping here, Hans and Fritz and Gunther, right? Mm-hmm. And friends with Hans and Fritz and Gunther, because a man is a man is a man, regardless of a soldier is a soldier is a soldier. It doesn't mean he's a tyrant or whatever. And but like you said, all the food was taken for the German soldiers.
Oh yeah.
And they were starving, but that's how she grew up, and that's what it is, whatever. And she used to eat, they used to have flour because they would make pasta or whatever. And I don't know if they would wait, but they would wait for bugs to be there. So that would be the extra protein that they would have. Yeah. And she remembers something stirring up one day, and she was telling me this. And there was the German propaganda that the Americans are going to rape, pillage, and all that, right? Mm-hmm. So once Hans and Franz never returned. It was Frank, Bob, and John who were there, and she was scared, like being 10 years old. She was extremely scared, and that's the first time she tried chocolate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
GI gave a Hershey bar or something like that, and then she got friends with Frank, Bob, and John.
Yeah.
And when this casino thing was happening, the back and forth with the casino, before Clark's bombing, she would always ask, like, where's John? And the GI, the American GI, would just nod his head. And it's like, even when I was young and she was telling this, I don't know, I had visions of this, man. It's like, oh my God, like this guy's not coming back, and this guy when he leaves, anyways.
Yeah.
And
where my mom was there, she never saw an American soldiers. They were so far in South France and away from where they invaded in the Marseille area in August of 44. It was only after the Allies landed in Normandy where the troops started to pull out, but then American air power struck nearby railroad stations nearby. So her vision of seeing these American planes in the sky, hey, the Americans are finally here, they're coming. But she never saw a soldier. It's just when the Germans left. And then one instance she did talk about was the fact that the resistance in the area ended up ambushing a German patrol and ended up shooting a bunch of Germans. And she and a bunch of her friends went out to see the dead Germans. And she said she should have never have done that.
No, bloody hell!
Well, I can see maybe the curiosity, the fact that the Germans are dead. We don't have to worry about them anymore. They were horrible. And then to go out and see the carnage wrought by the ambush was a little too much.
And how prevalent was the resistance where she was?
She never really said. It was just that one instance she recalls, but she did mention the Germans would come around constantly at all hours of the night, trying to checking for confiscated weapons and this, that, and the other. But she never really got specific on how prevalent it was in her area. So
bloody hell, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I try to speak to my children about this, and they roll their eyes, oh, Dad, can you shut up, this and that. But I try to tell them, hey, man, you're here because of that. It's like,
yeah.
Anyways.
But, my dad and my mom met in the early 50s when he was stationed in Marseille, and they married in 56. And then she left. They came back to the States. She eventually became an American citizen, and finally went back to France in 1971.
That long, eh?
That long to see the family again. Yeah.
Man. Okay. All right. I'm going to start getting emotional here. Let's stop this.
Okay.
Let's answer a question here.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the Fire Movement solitaire game called Kamikaze?
No, I have not. The only, of course, this was after I did Pick-a-Duty. I think it was High Flying Dice came out with a kamikaze type game, and I was going to try to incorporate Pick-a-Duty with that because it took a different approach where you could, when the plane finally attacked a certain area from I think it was called Gods from the Sky or something like that. I can't remember. But I never got around to that. Other things came up, and as you see behind you there, the little graphic thing. So, but anyway, no, I have not. I was not aware of that.
Do you play any? Do you have time to play any other games? Where do you get your ideas for mechanics in terms of your game?
Yeah, I do play occasionally. Of course, I still have my son here at the house who's going to college. And of course, my wife, and the games that we usually play, we like playing the Game of Thrones version of Risk. And then we played a game called Constellations, which is a sky building card type game where you end up building the own star fields. It's a fun little game. And then we played one last night called Evolution, which was interesting. It took us a while to kind of wrap our heads around the rules, but it was fun. My wife ended up winning. Again, I seem to be on the short end of the stick when I play games, but that's okay. I enjoy playing them.
So you do play Euros then? Yeah,
that, and occasionally I'll end up playing those games by Greg Smith, Silent Service, The Hunters, The Hunted. Those are pretty good games there.
Yeah, because it's funny, eh? Because you seem to be the Greg Smith for Legion War games. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's I'll take it as a compliment. He does design some pretty good games. Yeah.
Have you ever met Greg?
I gotta say, I don't do it alone. I've had help in the past, and I still have help in getting these games done. And without Sean's contribution in the past and Bob's contribution currently, I wouldn't be as far along as I am now.
You ever met Greg?
No, I have not. We're only friends on Facebook. I haven't met him yet.
Super nice guy.
Yeah.
Super nice guy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Here I got some more questions. But oh yeah, you're into computers, something fierce. Say you're a webmaster. Oh, the 70th Infantry Division Association.
Yes. Yeah. That's the unit that my grandfather served with.
That's why I said the 271st, the 251st there.
Yeah.
So you're the webmaster for that, and you're president of that association.
Yes.
So before you, there was no website and there was no recognition of the 70th Infantry. Is that right?
That's pretty much correct. They didn't have a website when I first joined the association in '95. When I found out that one existed, and I wasn't aware that my grandfather had served with the division up until that time. I gave my dad a call I said, Dad, what patch did Grandpa wear? He said, I don't know what it was, but it was the shape of an axe head. That's what he remembered. And I said, well, there's only one patch that's shaped like that, and that's the 70th Infantry Division. And then with the help of my uncle, he sent me what paperwork he had that belonged to my grandfather, and that's when I was able to figure out he served with the 270th Combat Engineers. And then when I went to my first reunion in Orlando in '96, I actually met his first sergeant of the company and two of his fellow Company C engineers. Yeah.
I got John Longshore here, says he was assigned to the 70th Division for a good while. What's TNG?
Training. That's what the 70th became after several years after World War II. They became a training division. Yeah.
Now, I'm super glad for minds like you and hearts like you, Steve, because a lot of these veterans, obviously, they don't want to talk about what they've seen or even what they've not seen. It's just like, why go back there? But that forgotten history should not be forgotten. I think it's so important. Right now, I'm listening to an audiobook, and it seems, I don't even know the title of it, but it's something about this man called something, not Eichert, because that's the Academy Games, but Urquhart. It's D-Day from the perspective of the German soldiers.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and they seem to think that it might be fake because they can't.
Yeah, I've read the same book.
So, what do you think?
Hang on 1 second.
Yeah. Volumes 1 and 2, is that right?
I thought I had the book available. I know I've got it in there. Is it Holger? Holger? The author?
I don't know. I just recently found it on YouTube, but I wanna buy the audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
Should I get it?
It makes for interesting reading, but unfortunately, there's no sources cited.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know if they're true or not. They're convincing, but I don't know if they're true or not. So I don't know.
Well, he seems to have the time and the places right.
Yeah, he does it that, and what he writes is pretty believable from these guys. He says they're based on his father's work that never got published during the war.
Exactly.
So I just don't know. I don't know. Well, you see, I've heard the same thing about.
It's Holger Eckertz.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Thank you, AJ.
Yeah.
You know what, Steve? AJ, this guy, he looks like he's a tattooed guy. He's got a beard, long hair. The guy, he's a philosopher, man. And he's got his website, his YouTube channel is Hexes and Soldiers. And you know what? Check the guy out. The guy's such a sweetheart. And he's a philosopher like you. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So you know what? I'm gonna get the book. The book. I'm ADD, right? So reading for me, that's why I jump back from question to question. Okay. So I gotta listen.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And I being a musician, I listen very well.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm gonna spend $30 on the audio. Yeah, I enjoyed that stuff. Whatever.
Yeah, and then at some point they do decide, hey, this is all bogus. Well, okay, fine, you won't read it again.
And it was fun. It was fun while it happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, hold on here. Oh, da, la, la, la. Oh, yeah, here you go, Steve. Many of your games are on individual planes. Have you ever considered squadron level?
Well, that's pretty much what Forgotten Sideshow is going to be like. It's going to be on a squadron level. You have the option of flying one plane in the basic game, but in the advanced game, you're going to be managing a squadron of aircraft. You'll have a pool of pilots. You'll have to assign them on missions. The more missions you assign them to, you're going to have to deal with fatigue and rest. I'm kind of excited about it. It might not be some player's cup of tea, but what's going to be interesting is that the targets in the Gazetteer are all actual targets that the squadron actually hit while they were in flying their missions out of Bougainville, Piva Airfield.
Now, talking about squadron, I don't know if I'm mistaken with the scale, but the GMT game called by Jeremy White. I gotta look at it now. For God's sake, it's called Skies Above the Reich. Have you seen that game? Have you played that game?
No, I have not. I don't own that game. No.
Do you know of that game?
I know of it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you get your ideas? Like, how do you come up with your ideas mechanic wise? Or is there a certain designer that you always go to?
No. All these games I've published so far have their basis in B-29 Super Fortress, and that is based in itself of, the B-17 Queen of the Skies. When I first started this project, I actually got in contact with, I think it's Vince Fratelli, who actually worked on B-17 Queen of the Skies when Avalon Hill acquired it.
Okay.
And he said, yeah, you got my blessing. It needs to be updated. And that added fuel to the fire, and that's what all the other games have progressed to. The norm from that is going to be, or the deviation from that will be Nordwind, since it's going to be 2-player and card driven. And okay. I try to Greg Smith's games. The mechanics are pretty cool with that, and I've been toying with the Mosquito fleet, doing PT boats, and Another designer, John Heim, has got one already really basically ready to go. It just needs to be kind of play tested a lot. So I might use some of his mechanics in the next series of games. I might be down the road. Right now, I've got to get the ones I've got in various stages of production done, and they're going to all be based on V29, V17. Yeah.
Okay. Have any other companies other than Legion approached you to do a solitaire playing game?
No. It's all been
Legion, eh?
Yeah, all been Legion. Yeah.
Okay, man. I'm still thinking about the stories of your mom, your dad. I mean, that for me is the most interesting thing.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, Gunther Eipert, the CEO of Academy Games, he actually had the chance to record some old a German army guys. And they were in Stalingrad. I mean, the stories that these guys can tell, man.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Steve, this was incredibly entertaining for me. I've got shivers. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate the time from all the guys asking the questions. And I'm sure I could go on for an hour just talking about stories of World War II and all that.
Yeah.
And I've got another question.
Yeah.
Card-driven game. That's a first for you.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to keep it simple. I thought the use of cards would simplify things.
Okay.
Tables are going to be at a minimum. Matter of fact, they're all on one sheet. You won't have a book. I want to gear this towards introducing, younger people to the hobby.
Right.
I know it's been done in the past. To what effect, I don't know. But I always feel that if there's something simpler, somebody can learn to play, and within one sitting, you're good to go. And then who knows what it might lead to.
Have you played the RAF, the Battle of Britain by John Butterfield?
No, I have not. I have the game.
Okay.
My time for playing games is pretty limited.
I understand.
So I do have it, and of course on the solitaire page on Facebook, a lot of people do play it, and I need one day just to sit down and open it up and lay it all out and give it a shot.
Now, in terms of card-driven game, I mean, obviously the sequence of play cards that I'm going to let you go on BGG. Stuka Joe did a sequence of play cards, so you don't even have to access the rules or all that. You just turn the card and you play the game. That might give you some idea of something else where...
Yeah. Basically, the cards in Nordwind are going to be a function of supply.
Okay.
The Germans at the start are loaded because they launched the attack in secrecy, even though the Allies kind of knew what was coming.
Okay.
But as time progresses, the Germans get less and less cards per turn, whereas the Americans, their hand count pretty much remains the same. So at some point, what the Germans are going to have to do is push hard in the beginning, try to get some gains and break through to make it to the other side of the board before the Americans can shore up their line and prevent it from happening.
Now, how many steps into your sequence of play in that game?
Well, right now, you'll have you'll have your hand count. You'll get your cards dealt. You pick from a pile. Depending on what cards you play, you either move, have combat, resolve combat, repeat with the allied player, and then start again. So maybe 4 to 5 phases per turn, and that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay, it's not like a sequence of like a page and a half worth of
not right
sequence.
now. No, it's I'm trying to keep it simple on purpose. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All the combat values will be the same. I mean, there's no higher combat value for a tank versus infantry. The reason being the terrain negates the effectiveness of a tank in Nordwind.
Right.
Very mountainous terrain. They were restricted to roads, susceptible to ambushes. But they do provide a shift in the column when you do decide to attack.
Okay. Okay.
That's by if the defender has tanks or anti-tank weapons, there's an offset. So you'll have some of that. So everything's kind of abstracted, but the counters will represent the actual units that were involved in the combat.
Okay. Well, I look forward to that game.
Yeah.
Okay, Steve, stick around. I'm going to play my out sequence. Yep. And thank you, people, for asking some questions and being around. Steve, again, thank you very much. This was...
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. It was fun.
And here we go with the outro, as I call it. Bang.